Hi, room 28. This is Miss Amber. It's really late at night. I came in my bedroom and set up my laptop because I just got done doing dishes and cleaning up my kitchen, and my dishwasher sounds like a Mack truck driving through my kitchen. So I couldn't sit over there and do my webcam videos like I normally do. I had to come into my bedroom. But I'm really excited. It's really late at night, and I found something on my son's floor. And when I was tucking him into bed, it's a book I ordered to read to you guys, and it's the story of Hidden Figures. Now, this book inspired the movie Hidden Figures. This is the untold true story of four African American women who helped launch our nation into space. And I think it's really important that I share stories that celebrate diversity and all of the wonderful things that can come of it when we come together and work together. This is also the year we're celebrating 100 years of the women's suffrage movement. So it's women fighting for equal rights. So here's three African American women who helped figure out something to help us get into space. I haven't read the book, I have not seen the movie, but what I'm going to do today is I'm going to read chapter one. Every video I make, I will read one chapter, and you can listen to the whole book. And then after you're done listening to the whole book, you can watch the movie with your families. So I'm really excited about this. I've wanted to read this story for a really long time. I ordered it off the Scholastic website, and my son got it from his teacher and never gave it to me. He just put it on his floor in his bedroom, maybe read later, and I just found it, so I'm really excited. It's really late at night. I should be getting ready for bed, but instead I'm going to read a chapter to you. So I hope you like it. Now make sure after you watch this video, you hit that, I'm not sure which way the video is, the green arrow. It's either in this corner or this corner of the screen, and that way I know that you did this activity on Seesaw. So I'm really proud of everybody who's participating, and the families, thank you very much for working with your student. I think my room has the best families in the entire state of Michigan. So I applaud you. Thank you. Okay, so without any more waiting, I'm going to get started on the story of Hidden Figures by Margot Lee Shetterly. Very poetic name. And this is the cover of the book. And here we go, Hidden Figures, three African American women. Can't wait to hear what they actually did. Who helped launch our nation into space. Okay, I'm really excited. We're going to read the prologue. So let's see. This is a little bit about the book. Okay, it comes before chapter one, the prologue. Growing up in Hampton, Virginia, I assumed the face of science was brown like mine. My dad worked at the Langley Research Center at NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. He started there as an engineering intern in 1964 and retired as an internationally respected climate scientist in 2004. Our next door neighbor taught physics. Our church pews were crowded with mathematicians. I knew so many African Americans working in science, math, and engineering that I thought that's just what black folks did. My father, who as a high school student had wanted to study electrical engineering, lived a different story. Become a physical education teacher, my grandfather told him. He thought my dad would have trouble finding work as an engineer. In the 1960s, most college-educated African Americans took teaching jobs or worked for the post office. As late as 1970, just 1% of all American engineers were black, and my father was one of them. Because of my father's job, I was part of the NASA family. I grew up saving my allowance to buy tickets to ride ponies at the annual NASA Carnival and sharing my Christmas wish list with the Santa at the NASA holiday party. On Thursday nights, I sat with my family and cheered for the Stars, my dad's NBA team. That's the NASA Basketball Association. My Sunday school teacher worked at NASA as a computer doing complex math for the aerospace engineers. She wasn't alone. From the 1940s through the 1970s, hundreds of women, many of whom were Black, worked as mathematicians at NASA. It wasn't until I was older that I appreciated just how extraordinary this occupation was for Black women in the South during the days of segregation. The first 5 women were hired at Langley as computers in 1935, and they were white. 10 years later, there were more than 400 women working as mathematicians, and many of them were Black. The contributions made by these African American women have never been heralded, but they deserve to be remembered. And not as a side note in someone else's account, but as the center of their own story. These women should be celebrated not just because they are Black or because they are women, but because they are an important part of American history. This is their story. Chapter 1, Setting the Scene. Dorothy Vaughan, Mary Jackson, Katherine Johnson, and Christine Darden loved math. As children, they showed special skill in arithmetic, and they went on to study mathematics in college. After graduation, they worked as teachers before going to work as computers or mathematicians for the government's Air and Space Program. Over the years, hundreds of women worked as mathematicians for the federal agency called NACA, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, which researched and promoted the study of flight. But these women were among many who distinguished themselves with their talents and hard work. Dorothy Vaughan was a pioneer. She joined the NACA in 1943, the first year the agency began hiring African American women as computers, and she was the first to be promoted into a management position. She was a role model for other women, and she helped to steer the careers of many talented women who were joining NACA. Mary Jackson was the first African American woman to move up the ranks and become an engineer at the NACA. She was a fighter, standing up for herself and for other women who deserved the chance to prove themselves. Her work helped to make supersonic aircraft fly higher and faster. Katherine Johnson was an African American woman who became an essential member of the team that put the first American in orbit around Earth. She was a dreamer and an independent thinker who was unafraid to imagine what others considered to be impossible. She helped do the math that was required to send the men into space and to bring them home safely. Christine Darden was an African American woman who became one of the world's leading experts on supersonic flight. She became the face of the next generation of female space scientists. Her groundbreaking research on predicting sonic booms is still used today. The accomplishments of these 4 women were remarkable, but their work was even more impressive because it was achieved while living and working in the South during a time when racial discrimination was commonplace and when most women with an interest in math were expected to become math teachers. A different time. In the 1800s, after the Civil War, the government passed laws that ended slavery and granted full citizenship and voting rights to African Americans. Later, however, many state and local governments passed other laws that legalized racial segregation. These regulations, which were most common in the South, kept Black people and white people apart in many situations. They could not eat in the same restaurants. They could not drink from the same water fountains. They could not use the same restrooms. They could not attend the same schools. They could not ride in the same parts of the buses. They could not live in the same neighborhoods. They could not receive care in the same hospitals. They could not visit the same beaches. They could not compete on the same sports teams. They could not sit in the same sections in the movie theaters. They could not marry someone of a different race. They could not even be buried in the same cemeteries. Technically, African Americans had the right to vote. However, many local laws made it impossible for them to do so. The communities levied and charged poll taxes or enforced literacy requirements or imposed other restrictions that made it difficult or impossible for Black people to register and vote. And since people who were not registered to vote weren't allowed to serve on juries or run for political office, many African Americans were deprived of these civil rights as well. During the 1930s, the United States experienced the Great Depression, a decade-long period of economic struggle. Jobs became difficult to find and wages decreased dramatically. All Americans suffered, but African Americans faced the most serious challenges in finding work. For many African Americans, World War II was an opportunity to make a better life for themselves and their families. Black men enlisted in the military in large numbers, even though they served in separate Black infantry regiments, usually overseen by white officers. They believed that their loyalty and patriotism would help Blacks to earn the rights that white citizens had. Women also enlisted in the Army, where they were called WACs, for Women's Army Corps, and they served in all-female units in the Navy too. And for women like Dorothy Vaughan, Mary Jackson, Katherine Johnson, and Christine Darden, World War II opened the door to a career as a professional mathematician. Each of them found their way to the Langley Laboratory, where they met one another, and women like them, smart, brave, confident, and good at math. The war was changing the world, and it would change their lives as well. So that's the end of chapter 1. I will be posting chapter 2 probably tomorrow. I'm really excited to read this book. Remember to hit that green arrow so you complete this activity. Have an amazing day, evening, morning, wherever you're at in the span of the day, and I'll see you soon.